The Rolls-Royce is parked in the driveway now. You pick the color yourself. The engine barely makes a sound when it starts. And if you watch that video, you already know what it feels like to sit behind that wheel and imagine it's actually yours. So, here's the next question. Where does a car like that actually take you? Because the people who own Rolls-Royces at this level don't drive them to the office. They drive them to private airstrips. And those airstrips lead somewhere most of us will never see with our own eyes. Somewhere with no neighbors, no noise, no schedule, but your own. A private island. Today, we're going past the postcard version of paradise. We're going to look at what these islands actually offer the people who own or rent them, how they're designed down to the smallest detail, what it's genuinely like to be a guest there, and why owning one of these places puts you in a category so small that most billionaires don't even qualify. Let's start with what you're actually paying for. When most people picture a private island, they picture sand and palm trees. That's the part everyone gets right. What they don't picture is the sheer amount of infrastructure hidden underneath that untouched look. Take Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands, owned by Richard Branson. Guests don't just get a beach. They get the entire island, every villa, every trail, every stretch of coastline. 24 guests can book the whole property, and from that moment, the island stops being a resort and starts being a private world built entirely around them. There's a resident team ready to shift a candlelit dinner from the beach to the cliffside in the time it takes you to change your mind. Then there's Laukala Island in Fiji, once owned by the founder of Red Bull. Laukala grows nearly everything guests eat right there on the island. Its own farm, its own dairy, its own chocolate factory. When you eat dinner there, most of what's on your plate never left the island at all. That's not a marketing detail. That's a level of control over your own environment that almost nobody experiences in daily life. And then there's the tier above even that. Islands built to be owned outright, not visited. Places like Motu Tain in French Polynesia, which sold for tens of millions of dollars to a single private buyer with no public access at all, ever. You don't book a night there. You either own it or you've never heard of it. What all of these islands are really offering isn't luxury in the traditional sense. It's the removal of every friction point in life. No traffic, no crowds, no waiting, no compromise. The product isn't the beach. The product is total control over your own reality. This is where it gets genuinely fascinating, because building on a private island is one of the hardest things you can do in architecture. Every piece of material, every panel of glass, every tile has to be shipped in, sometimes by barge, sometimes by helicopter, across open ocean, to a piece of land with no existing roads and no local supply chain. Architects working on these projects aren't just designing a house. They're solving a logistics problem that would break most construction firms before it breaks the client's patience. Take the villas on Laukala. They're built almost entirely from timber sourced or grown on the island itself, with thatched roofing designed to survive tropical storms while still looking like it belongs in a dream. Every villa has its own private pool, its own butler, and floor-to-ceiling openings, so the inside of the house and the island itself stop feeling like separate things. On islands designed for private ownership, the brief is even more specific. The owner often wants the build to feel like the island was barely touched at all. Even when there's a helicopter pad, a desalination plant, a private marina, and enough solar and battery infrastructure to run a small town, all hidden behind the tree line. That's the real skill in island design, making 9 figures of engineering disappear into a view. There's also a psychological layer to the design that most guests never consciously notice, but absolutely feel. Pathways are curved instead of straight, so you never see the whole island at once. Villas are spaced far enough apart that you can hear the ocean, but never another guest. Even the lighting is engineered around this idea. Warm, low, and hidden inside the architecture itself. So at night, the island seems to glow from within, rather than being lit by anything visible. None of that happens by accident. It's the result of architects and lighting designers studying exactly how a person's mind relaxes when it stops being able to see the edges of a space. Even the sound is designed. On several of these islands, the placement of buildings is planned around wind direction, so that the sound of waves reaches every villa at roughly the same volume, day and night. Like a form of ambient white noise nobody paid attention to on purpose, but everybody notices the absence of the moment they leave. Here's the part that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. So, let's walk through it. Your arrival usually isn't by ferry. It's by seaplane or private helicopter, and the island is often visible from the air minutes before you land, which is intentional. Every private island wants that first glimpse to feel like the moment the outside world falls away. There's no check-in desk. Staff already know your name, your preferred drink, and in some cases, your allergies and your anniversary, because you were asked before you arrived arrived. On islands like Necker, the staff-to-guest ratio is high enough that requests aren't really requests. They're expectations that get fulfilled before you finish the sentence. Meals aren't scheduled around a kitchen's hours. They're built around you. Dinner can move from a formal table to a private sandbar that only exists at low tide, with a table and chairs already set up when you get there. Nothing about the day runs on someone else's clock, which, if you think about it, might be the single rarest luxury on earth. Not the food, not the room. Time itself, finally under your control. And then there's the privacy. No paparazzi. No other guests, unless you invited them. No possibility of running into a stranger on your walk to breakfast. For guests who've spent their entire adult life being recognized in public, that kind of silence is worth more than almost anything money can buy elsewhere. There's a smaller detail that tends to stay with people longer than the big ones. On most of these islands, you stop wearing a watch. Not because you're told to, but because nothing around you is measured in minutes anymore. Sunrise tells you when breakfast starts. Sunset tells you when dinner begins. Somewhere around day 2, most guests describe the same feeling. Their shoulders drop, their breathing slows, and the constant low hum of being reachable, being watched, being on a schedule just switches off. That shift is the actual product being sold. The island is just where it happens to take place. So why can't more people access this? A few reasons, and they stack on top of each other. First, the price. A week on a fully booked private island like Necker can run into 6 figures. And that's before you're even talking about buying one outright, which usually starts in the tens of millions and climbs from there depending on size, location, and infrastructure. Second, scarcity. There are only so many islands on Earth with the right combination of climate, water access, and legal ownership rights that even allow private development. Once one sells, it's gone. Nobody's making more of them. Third, and this is the part people miss, maintaining one of these places is its own full-time operation. Fresh water, power, staffing, security, storm protection. Owning a private island isn't a purchase. It's an ongoing commitment that most people with money simply don't want to take on. That's exactly why the ones who do are in such a small category. It's not just about being rich enough to buy it. It's about being ready to run it. That's the real filter, not the price tag, the responsibility behind it. So picture it for a second. The Rolls-Royce from last time isn't parked outside an office building anymore. It's parked at a private airstrip, engine off, waiting while a seaplane takes you the rest of the way. That's the world these islands belong to. One long, unbroken chain of getting exactly what you want, exactly when you want it, with nobody else's schedule in the way. None of this is out of reach because of who you are. It's out of reach right now because of where you are in the process. The people who eventually own places like this almost never start there. They start by building something, saving something, working towards something, one decision at a time, the same way you're building whatever you're building right now. Keep going. The island isn't the fantasy. It's just the finish line for people who didn't stop. If you want to see what it actually costs to buy your own piece of paradise, stick around, because that's exactly what we're breaking down next.